We are educators. We want to bring the best possible opportunities for our students. We want to take them places. We want to do everything possible to ignite the spark of inspiration. We want to provide the best infrastructure. At the same time, we also want to learn, explore, experience, and grow. But we always encounter one major roadblock: funding. Well, not anymore. In this series, we are going to discover every possible way to arrange funds or to raise capital. Hi, it's Himannshu, and I welcome you to the brand new episode of The TEDS Show. Today's episode is going to be super exciting, so keep listening on Apple, Spotify, or on your preferred platform. Welcome back to the brand new episode of The TEDS Show. I am glad that you have liked all the 5 episodes on the non-repayable funding. Starting today, I'll be covering the repayable funding aspects, and in today's episode, which is also the 6th episode of the Ed Invest series, we are going to discuss everything about debts. In this episode, we will understand what is the meaning and purpose of debts, different ways to raise debts with examples, and its process. I hope that this episode will give you detailed insight on this concept, and I just wish you an engaging and amazing learning experience. In the first episode of this series, we have covered the basics of debts and other types of repayable and non-repayable funding opportunities. So if you have not listened to the introduction to funding, which was our first episode, then I suggest you to listen to that episode and then listen to this episode for better understanding. And during this episode, if you feel stuck, confused, or if you have any questions, then I would suggest you to make a note of them and send me a voice message using Anchor app after this episode. Or if you are listening to this episode on YouTube, then share it in the comment section and I will address all your questions in the Q&A podcast. So let's get started and understand debts. In simple words, debt is a sum of money received by one party or person from another party or person with a commitment to pay it back in a stipulated time period, that too with or without interest, as described at the time of receiving the money and or signing the agreement. Debts can be broadly categorized in 5 different categories. These are secured debts, unsecured debts, revolving debts, unrevolving debts, and sneaky debts. Let's understand these terminologies before moving further. A secured debt is a debt or money that one can receive in lieu of or for tangible item. Example, a car loan for buying a car, a home loan or mortgage for buying a home, loan against jewelry, or loan by pledging your share. This type of debt instrument works best for the lender, as in case of any default of timely payment, the lender may choose to sell the tangible item in order to recover their debts. An unsecured debt, on the other hand, is a debt or money that one can receive without giving any tangible item, and the lender chooses to give money purely on the basis of the debtor's creditworthiness. A few examples of this can be a personal loan or an educational loan. A revolving debt is an open line of credit, wherein one can utilize the line of credit for as long as they can. 2 main examples of a revolving debt can be a credit card, which you can use and pay it back later and then reuse it based on the credit limit set by the lender. The credit limit is decided by the lender based on the previous track record and the creditworthiness of the borrower. The other example can be an overdraft, a limit that you may get from your bank, and the bank chooses to give you the overdraft limit or the OD limit based on the creditworthiness of your business. An unrevolving debt, on the other hand, is a line of credit that one can use for once, and it can't be reused unless one chooses to apply for it again. An example can be a mortgage which you can receive on your property for once, and you pay it back within a certain time frame. And once it's completely paid, or even in between, you may choose to reapply for your mortgage, and that may be for buying another property or for remortgaging the same property. Sneaky debt can be a mix of secured or unsecured debts, which one can receive for buying new products or services, and in this case, usually one can pay the principal amount back in a short span of time without having to pay any interest. An example could be you buy a mobile phone or a new television through a line of credit or credit card, which is interest free for a first few days, usually anytime between 30 days to 90 days. And if one fails to pay the amount during this time, then the whooping interest can be charged by the lender. Now, if you are an educator or an educational institution, then you may choose to go with any of the described instruments for your personal or professional needs. An example of the professional need can be establishing a new school, procuring new resources for your educational institution, or upgrading the existing infrastructure in your school, and even more. And you may also choose to support your students by helping them with educational loans. But should you straight away go for these instruments? I believe that you should first understand the two major financing options. These are debt finance and equity finance. A debt finance is a money borrowed by an organization to be paid back with interest at a future date. It could be in the form of a secured or an unsecured debt or loan. An organization takes up a loan to either finance a working capital or an acquisition, or maybe for any other reason. One can choose the following option to raise debt finance. You can raise debt finance from a family or a friend, from bank or other non-banking financial institutions. You can also go with the government-backed loans, line of credit, or you may also choose to go with private debt financing by approaching the investors or money lenders. Equity financing, on the other hand, is a money borrowed by an organization to be paid back in the form of equity or shares of the organization, which the lender may choose to cash at a later date by selling it, and during the term the lender is entitled to the profit share of the organization. The common example of equity financing are seed funding, angel fund, venture capital, private equity, and more. We will cover this detail in our next episode. In this episode, we will only understand debt financing. Now, debt financing can be in the form of a long-term debt or a short-term debt. Long-term debt financing works best for organizations or institutions when they consider to go for a secured debt, maybe for procuring resources, materials, building, land, etc., as it also gives the lender a comfort to trust the borrower as the debt is secured by collaterals. Short-term debt financing, on the other hand, usually applies to the money needed for the day-to-day operations of the organization, such as purchasing inventory, supplies, or paying the wages or salaries to the employees. Short-term financing is referred to as an operating loan or a short-term loan because scheduled repayment takes place in less than or equal to 1 year's time. A line of credit is an example of short-term debt financing. Line of credit may also be typically secured by the collaterals. Let us now understand some of the advantages and disadvantages of considering debts. The main advantages for you to consider debts over equity financing are: first, you don't give up control. With debt financing, you will need to pay back what you have borrowed with interest, but you don't have to worry about sharing decisions or profit with anybody else for the investment you receive. Second, some form of debts are easy to qualify for. As an upcoming institution or a new business owner, you may have a hard time getting the capital you may need through equity financing unless you have a strong product or service and experience in the industry. Even some form of debt financing may be out of reach for startups or new businesses. But there are some available that you can access without having the revenue and time in business to back you up. And if you are a startup, then you may also consider to go with the startup financing options. Third, options are flexible. Among various debt financing options and various lenders, you will have a wide selection of options to choose from. Even if you are a new business owner, you can pick the loan type or the debt type and lender that best suits your need. And you may even have some control over the repayment terms as long as it's within the parameters set by the lender. Fourth, interest may be tax deductible. Now, many business loans have tax deduction for the interest you pay each year, which can reduce your taxable income. The main disadvantages, on the other hand, are it can be expensive. Depending upon the credit situation, time in business, and loan type, you could have an interest rate of 15% or higher with the financing product you end up with. And you must also make sure that you can afford to repay what you owe. Second, you may not qualify. It is possible to get approved for debt financing even if you have a bad credit. But if you are looking for favorable terms, then you may have a hard time getting what you want. Third, you may be held personally responsible to repay. Many small business loans require what's called a personal guarantee. This clause states that if your business can't repay the debt, you will be on the hook to pay it back with your personal assets. If there is a question about the viability of your business, it may not be worth putting your personal finances at risk. Keeping the same in mind, you should always read the clauses before you sign the paperwork. I'm sure that this episode has given you a detailed insight on debts, and if you are ready to scale up your business with debts or with any other form of repayable and non-repayable funding options, then I wish you a great success. If you have liked this podcast, then do rate us on Apple Podcasts and share it in your network, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to the TEDS Show. I hope it was a great learning experience for you. If you have any questions or suggestions, then do share a voice message with me on Anchor. Or if you are listening this podcast on YouTube, then share it in the comment section and I will address all your questions in the Q&A session. And I'll see you in the next episode. Till then, stay safe and stay happy.